The carolers ended their song, standing in the front yard of the Haywood house. The Haywood house was located at the end of a wooded country road that during the month of December was, at one time, lit bright with Christmas lights. In the front yard was, at one time, a nativity scene lit up by a spotlight from below. The little baby Jesus being held by Mary, surrounded by shepherds, sheep, and other characters from the Gospel of Matthew. The Haywood family had welcomed Christmas carolers and those that drove around searching out light displays in years past. They were well known in their small town for the Christmas cheer. The Haywood family had loved the Christmas season, and if there was a Grinch within the family, they kept it to themselves. The man that was behind all the decorating was Henry Haywood, the outdoor decorations, that is. His friends and family called him Griswood. No one called him Griswood more than Henry's oldest and only brother, Edward Haywood. That was then. Now the yard was dark, absent of any sort of working decorations. A single strand of lights were still on the holly bushes under the house's windows. Tonight, the lane towards the Haywoods was dark, and the only light being produced was by a struggling light near the front door. Henry Haywood slammed the door on the carolers, ignoring the constant bark of his small, yapping dog. The next morning was cold, sky gray, trees skeletal beings. Henry cranked his old red truck that struggled to turn over due to the cold. In a thick tan brown coat and woolen gloves, he turned the ignition over and over with each turn. Henry cursed under his breath. When the engine finally roared to life, he pulled out of the driveway. Henry turned on the radio, tuning it through static till he landed on a decent channel. Christmas tunes blared from out of the speakers as he drove down the wooden lane onto the main highway, headed into town. He followed lighted candy canes and wreaths that was put up on the power poles throughout town. The deeper he drove into town, the more traffic he encountered. He cursed the stop-and-go traffic. The boutique shops in the older downtown section was crowded with holiday shoppers walking about on the sidewalks. More and more people shopping online my ass, Henry grumbled, watching the masses of people at a red light. His destination was the local post office. He stood in line with others his age. An elderly woman struggled with the understanding with what was being explained to her. "I'm sorry, Miss Love, but this envelope is blank. We won't be able to send this if there isn't a mailing address or return address." Clearly frustrated. "But I have my stamps." A few more words were exchanged. Miss Love spat venom about the Democratic Party that made no sense whatsoever. "Poor soul," the mail clerk said under his breath, shaking his head. Henry stepped up to the counter with his package underneath his arm. "Mr. Haywood!" exclaimed the mail clerk enthusiastically, then whispering, "My favorite guest." Henry set the square package upon the surface of the counter. "How are you doing today, Charlie? You still holding on to your sanity this holiday season?" asked Henry. Charlie was a tall, lanky man, well-dressed, with a head full of hair of salt and pepper. Charlie looked past Henry at the line of the elderly that formed behind Henry, and answered, "Barely, Henry. Just barely." Charlie the mail clerk picked up Henry's package, placing it onto the scale. "Nerdy knickknacks is mostly what we send out these days. A handwritten letter is a dying form of art. I pity Gen Alpha," said Charlie, scanning the box. Speaking of handwritten letters, Henry placed a white envelope atop the counter. There were snowflake stickers stuck to the envelope. Henry flexed his arm, trying to work out the discomfort he began to feel entering the post office. "And that package isn't just from one of those online stores, Charlie. I'm sending my eldest son some of that coffee from the brewery downtown. Blueberry pancake, explained Henry. Artisan coffee? Case in point, said Charlie, flabbergasted. Henry swore he saw a new strand of gray hair appear near the man's temples. Charlie, the mail clerk, waved the envelope before him. The package was scanned. You don't look too good. You been taking care of yourself? Asked Charlie, noticing Henry massaging his muscles in his arm. Henry rolled his shoulder once more, grimacing, looking back at the line behind him. Yeah, I just been in a slump ever since Helen. Charlie, the mail clerk, gave Henry a look of sympathy, and Henry headed the mail clerk off before he said any more. Well, I should probably get back to the house. You know me, I don't like driving in twilight. On the way back to his house, Henry pulled off to the side of the road, just outside of Hollow Road Trailer Park. Looking past the business office up the red dirt roads at a blue-roofed trailer at the top of the hill, he sighed, working out the ache from his arm that was now in his wrist. He had hurt Helen, his late wife, and had also damaged his relationship here. I don't blame you, he said aloud. Henry had a tendency, of late, to talk to himself, even having had a full-on conversation with his dog. Once the pain had subsided, he cranked up his truck and pulled out, headed home. Back at the house, Henry removed his coat, hanging it just to the side of the door. He walked down the length of the dark hallway, turning on lights within the house as he went. From the hallway, Henry beelined it straight to his green recliner, kicking back. He then turned on the television. It wasn't until halfway through watching one of his television shows that he realized that his dog did not greet him. Henry's heart lurched into his throat. He kicked the recliner closed, looking toward where his dog napped most days. In the month of December, his bed was moved to the front of the Christmas tree, and the tree in Sir's usual spot. Sir, his small white fluffy Maltese, was curled up in his bed before the lit Christmas tree. It was a small, pitiful Christmas tree in the corner of the living room, to the right of the fireplace. A single strand of green, orange, and red lights on the front side of the tree. He paused the television, leaning forward, listening, hoping to hear Sir breathe. Sir was 15 years old. His 16th birthday would be at the end of January. Henry hoped, prayed, that he would live past this Christmas. He even hoped his best friend would outlive him. Henry could not hear the dog's struggled breath, so he got up, walked over the dog. Please, Henry pleaded, don't you leave me. When Henry reached the dog, he stood over him, watching for any signs of the rise of his chest. Sir's chest did not rise. Henry nudged Sir with the tip of his toe. No movement. No, not now. Henry was upset, big tears forming in his ducts. He nudged more forcefully. The dog's bed pushed deep beneath the tree. Sir yelped, desperately trying to pull himself out from beneath the tree. Henry watched the struggling dog, mouth opened wide. You were just sleeping? Sir made it out, plopped down, looked up at Henry, and huffed. Relieved, Henry squatted and scratched Sir upon the head. After the scare with Sir, Henry went straight into the kitchen, opened a can of his dog food, and fed him a large helping of food. It was gross, with the consistency of potted meat, but the dog enjoyed the food. When he fed Sir any other sort of dog food, he would never eat it, always looking up at Henry with his nose upturned. Too good for this food? Henry would ask. Sir would stare back blankly. Sir was older. He struggled eating solid food, so whether Henry liked feeding Sir canned dog food or not, it was the only sort of food he would eat. While Sir scarfed down his food, Henry went straight to the refrigerator, pulled out pre-cut honey ham and mayonnaise. From the pantry, a loaf of white bread. Sir had finished his food standing beneath Henry at the dining table as he constructed a ham and mayonnaise sandwich. With sandwich in hand, he sat at the dining table, alone, eating his sandwich. At one time, his dining table was full of friends and family, but one by one, like leaves upon a tree, they passed on, their souls taken away by a breeze to a beyond, be it heaven or hell. In the past, the house was decorated with strands of lighted greenery down the halls. On the front door was a round wreath with a purple ribbon. Up the stairs, along railings, lights were stranded. His wife used to enjoy decorating for the Christmas season. "'Tis the season," she would sing, decorating all throughout the house. He was forced to decorate, and under his breath he would grumble, half-heartedly, decorating, "'Tis the season indeed." It got to a point he was very thankful for this, that he was able to convince his wife to decorate as a family when their children came over for Thanksgiving. "Christmas is, after all, a family affair," he had told her. When his youngest, most intelligent son tried to wiggle his way out of the work, he held his son's presence hostage. Every year, it was the same. Henry would resist his wife with helping to decorate. But once he started to decorate, the Christmas spirit would slowly possess him. He would start grumbling as he decorated. Piece by piece, the spirit would grow. The grumbling would turn into humming, then to high-pitched singing. He was no Sinatra, but it did fill his wife with joy to hear Henry sing. He took a bite of his sandwich. Bite by bite, he reminisced of the Christmas of his past. Christmas was not always a joyous occasion for Henry and his siblings. Truly, it was a miserable time for his father as well. On Christmas Eve, Henry's mother had left Henry's father. The day that his mother left Henry's father, she had insisted that he take Henry and his brother hunting. A neighboring farm had at one time owned horses. As time passed, the neighbors aged, unable to take care of their herd of horses. When they got to an age that they could no longer feed them, the remaining horses they owned were not being fed properly. They walked around looking like skeletons, with skin hanging loosely off of them. Eventually, someone had called animal control. The horses were taken away to a horse shelter. After the horses had been taken away, the fields had begun to regrow. The family allowed those that they trusted to hunt rabbits in the field. Of course, only those that they did not suspect calling animal control on them. Henry's brother, Ed, followed their father through waist-high ragwort, the flowers growing a bright yellow. Pushed past thorn bushes that Henry's pant legs had lifted up, thorns wrapped around his ankles. Like razors, the thorns tore into his flesh. Henry shouted out, dropping father's shotgun that was trusted to young Henry. The gun clattered upon the ground. Ed gasped, whispering, "Are you all right, Henry?" Henry's father had turned around on his heels. He wore a blue jean jacket with fur lining. "God-damned idiot! You're lucky that the safety was on." He snatched up the gun, continued onward, saying, "Minor autism, nothing to worry about my ass." Ed pulled Henry up with a helping hand, following their father's path. Father and sons had returned home to find that their mother had packed up all her things, leaving the house almost empty and her children feeling hollow. Henry and his brother were truly hurt by their mother's action. Henry took a bite of a sandwich, screwed up his face. Too much mayonnaise. "Dry sandwiches are the worst," he told Sir. "I don't blame Mother now." Sir wagged his thinning tail. The skin beneath the fur was pink, and the tail curled up like a pig. Henry sighed. Growing up, Christmas had always been a hard time of year for Henry. If it wasn't for his wife, he would never have experienced the Christmas cheer. For many, many years, Henry had experienced Christmas blues, always in a state of depression leading up toward Christmas Eve. The level of depression always the highest on the eve of Christmas. It was inevitable that eventually he would be alone on Christmas. Well, he did have his fluffy white cloud of a dog, his fat, lumpy, grumpy friend who struggles to breathe. Sir was a gift for Henry from his wife when their children had graduated from college and had moved out. During that portion of his life, Henry was in a state of depression that had deepened. Just before his sons graduated, Henry had come clean to his wife that he had a daughter with another woman. After learning the truth, Henry and Helen's marriage began to spiral downward, out of control. This truth did not make Henry's relationship with his sons any better. In that low point of his life, he felt more like his father in any point of his life. "I will never be my father," Henry had told his reflection growing up. Though, in the end, Henry had just been as low as his father. Over time, through Christ, the relationship he had with his wife Helen began to heal. It was slow, but through Christ they continued their marriage. It was a tainted marriage, and Helen saw that Henry tortured himself, causing more pain than any human could physically deal with. He withdrew into himself more than he had in any time of his life. "This isn't fair. I'm the one that should be upset," Helen had told him. Henry agreed with her. In that time, he began to age faster, becoming haggard. Helen had knew that if he continued down this path, that Henry would kill himself from the guilt. Of course, that changed when he opened a box with red ribbons and bow with holes poked into it. Inside was the puppy Sir, looking like a small white ball of cotton. After finishing his ham sandwich, Henry sauntered over to his recliner, sitting back down in front of the television. He helped Sir up onto the foot of the recliner, where he curled up tight. Over the television was a clock, and a trio of nutcrackers standing at attention, teeth bared down. He thumbed through the channels, passing many Christmas movies. There was a Christmas Story on one of the channels. He never really cared for the movie. He landed upon Jingle All the Way, left it on the channel as background noise. Henry eventually fell asleep, feeling a mixture of tiredness from today's adventures and Christmas blues. Henry woke to Sir barking. A mist appeared from where his wife would sit knitting. The echo mist slowly passed across the room, up the stairs. Sir, slowly at its heels, struggled up the stairs after the mist. "Get out from under my feet. I'm going to trip, hurting both of us," his wife would tell the dog. His heart raced. He could hear Sir upstairs pacing. The old man rubbed his eyes, not believing what he saw. So he pulled himself from his recliner, climbed the stairs, not faring much better than Sir. He was out of breath when he finally reached the second floor. Breathing heavily, he walked towards Sir, who stood, tail wagging, looking up at the attic. Henry walked forward, pulled down the trap door up to the attic. He looked from Sir to the attic, huffed loudly. "Sit tight, Sir." The wooden ladder creaked beneath him as he clambered upward. He hadn't been up in the attic in years. The year his wife had died, the year his children's mother died. He and his sons had put away all the Christmas decorations, away in cardboard boxes. Well, it was more his children who did most of the work. He had sat in his recliner, wasting away. During that time, he held a snow globe that Helen had given him on Christmas Day long ago. It was a special moment, but what was so special, he could not remember. He just knew that it was special, treasured. The dry, dusty, musty stench of the attic greeted him when he stepped off the last stair. He huffed, breathing in deep, choking, chest hurting from the bitter cold of the attic. He reached out in the dark, pulled the chain hanging below the simple 12-volt light bulb. Henry's eyes struggled to adjust in the gloom. When his vision did adjust, The single light bulb and stacked boxes casted shadows throughout. Movement in the corner of the room caught his attention. "Helen?" Henry's voice cracked. No, it was the purple orb disappearing into a stack of boxes, labeled in his son's handwriting, Christmas decorations. Henry walked over to the boxes, cautiously, expecting someone to pop up out of one of the largest boxes. It was a move he knew that Ed would not hesitate to perform. Ed did enjoy startling Mother, Father, and Henry. Even as an adult, Ed never appeared from out of the boxes, unfortunately. Henry opened the topmost box that the orb had disappeared into. Inside the box was a tangle of Christmas lights, a tree topper, Saint's hat. Helen and Henry and their children bickered occasionally of what the tree topper should actually be. Helen was a fan of the traditional star. The kids had their preference being a chubby star from their favored video game. Inside the box, he saw the traditional tree topper star, a variety of other decorations, and at the top and safest place, at the center of a wreath, was the snow globe. Tears streamed down his cheek, and Henry sobbed. He reached down, picked up the globe, giving it a shake. A snowstorm wreaked havoc onto the small village within the globe. Henry watched the winter within the orb, turned it over, winded the mechanism at its back. The music it produced filled the attic with a sweet music, bringing with it memories of the past. Happy memories, nostalgic, but mostly for him, it heightened the feeling of holiday blues. Henry sighed, angrily shoved the snow globe back into the box, stormed out of the attic, leaving the stairs open, past Sir, and he sat back on his recliner, turned on the television, turning up the volume really high. Henry slept once more. Henry put on a pot of coffee while putting himself together for the day. After getting out of the shower, bathrobe on, he walked to the kitchen, stopping in his tracks, sniffing the air. Damn it, sir! He could smell the faint scent of dog feces. He looked beneath his bare feet, thinking maybe he had stepped in it between the bathroom and kitchen. He searched over and over, trying to find the source of the smell. It wasn't until after scolding the dog, feeling out of breath, that the source was found. It's that damn cheap coffee, he mumbled. Why does coffee smell like dog shit, he thought, bending down, scratching Sir's head in an attempt of an apology. He poured a cup of coffee in a coffee cup with an cartoon cowboy upon it. Saint was the protagonist of a series of books that he loved to read as he grew up. He stood at the kitchen looking out into the yard, sipping on his coffee. There was movement at the forest edge that caught his attention. My God, he gasped, almost spewing coffee onto the window. What in the hell was that? At the forest edge, he saw what he thought was his father, rimmed in a thin purple at the edges of his figure. He was see-through, standing at the forest edge. At his side was his mother, wearing a dress that looked purple. They waved, turned, and stepped into the forest. A pain twitched down his arm. Looking in disbelief, he pushed it from his mind, going about his day. The rest of that holiday season was spent in a form of depression haze for Henry. He went through the motions of his life. Wake up, fed Sir his meals, fed himself, eating like a young bachelor. He watched television, mostly trash shows, and watched the right-wing news station. He didn't know why he did it to himself, but that brought him down even more. If he was a younger man, he would have pulled himself out of his recliner, forcing himself to be active. But in his old age, he had no desire whatsoever to do anything. Henry awaited every day, waiting for the appearance of the orb that manifested in the same spot. From the place Helen sat upon the couch, it appeared, following the path. It came to a point for Sir that he did not get up, but just watched the orb follow its path. It was like a pre-programmed path that it followed every day. Time passed. Christmas grew nearer. On the eve of Christmas Eve, a second orb had appeared. Henry sat at the kitchen eating his last meal of the day when the doorbell rang, chiming throughout the house. Henry pushed his plate of food back. The chair screamed as he pushed upward. When he opened the front door, cold air rushed in, as well as 2 more purple orbs that seemed to push past him. "Ed?" he asked the orb. For a moment, he thought he saw the figure of his brother and his lover. Father never did like that Ed preferred his own gender. Ed was disowned. Henry had loved his brother, no matter, and did not care. That night that Ed had came out as being homosexual, Henry could remember it well. "I don't know why you'd be afraid of telling me, Ed," Henry had said. "I honestly don't care. Love, Ed, is love." Henry swore he saw the figure reach out, touching Henry's shoulder. Ed had always appeared on the eve of Christmas Eve, staying with Henry till the day after New Year's. Ed lived out of town. Both he and his husband were not a fan of driving back up north. The road's always a mess. There was that pain that streaked from his chest, down his arm. Henry rubbed it, grimacing. "I'm losing it," he told Sir, closing the front door, looking for the orb, yet not finding it. A depression nap followed. Something bumped down the chimney, landing and sending ash out into the air. Sir pounced from his place of rest upon the edge of the recliner, landing harshly, ignoring the pain, barking, yapping, and choking. "Ah, hush! Now hush!" he scolded the dog, kicking down the footrest, struggling to his feet. Henry rubbed the sleep from his eyes, looking at the clock. Its pendulums swinging back and forth. 10:30 p.m. it read. It would soon be Christmas Eve. Sir sniffed a round, soot-covered item near the fireplace. Henry bent over. The pain was always present now. With the sleeve of his long-sleeved shirt, Henry cleaned it the best he could. Beneath the grime was a snow globe. It played its music of its own accord. Footsteps from behind, the shuffle of feet. Walking down the hall were Ed and his husband, purple mist figures who sang but produced no sound. It was a holiday tradition. The adults of the family would drink and be merry as the children had slept upstairs. From down the stairs appeared Helen, who swayed across the floor toward Henry, twirling, dancing to a song that Henry could not hear. This was from a time the family was whole, happy, and merry. Helen's twirl stopped before Henry. She reached out, touching Henry's hand, holding the snow globe. Henry cried, looked down at the spot his wife had touched. Then he looked up. Helen was gone, as well as his brother. Sir had curled up on his pillow, paying no attention to the specters that had appeared. Henry looked from the snow globe to where his family had been. "Sir, I just had an idea." Up the stairs Henry darted, the best he could, back up the attic, the stairs still pulled down. Henry set about, pulling decorations from the boxes, decorating the house in a fury of activity. There was a great pain darting from his chest. Henry ignored it. With each piece of Christmas decorations Henry put out, a new orb appeared, a distant cousin. Henry placed more ornaments on the tree. He decorated his house. By the time he was done, it had looked as good as it had in the past, and with each piece he placed out, more orbs appeared, taking the shape of another family member. Sir did not move. When Henry placed the final decoration out, the star upon the tree, Henry was fully possessed by the Christmas spirit. He hadn't felt this way in a long time. Helen appeared, last among the crowd of purple specters. She reached out, touched his hands. Henry could feel it, the numbing in his arms, forgotten. "I forgive you," she said. It echoed throughout the house. And at midnight, the specters began to file out of the house into the forest edge. that his mother and father had disappeared into. Last to go was his wife Ellen, who stopped and smiled at him at the door. Sir barked. Following at Helen's heels, he glowed purple, his feet a blur that resembled floating mist. Henry smiled, following his family out into the cold and to the forest edge. Then he stepped into the forest, following them and stopping at a clearing where his family waited for him. It wasn't until after the New Year that Henry's body was found in a clearing near his house. The mail clerk, Charlie, after not seeing Henry for some time, tipped off the police that Henry had gone missing. In a blue-roofed trailer, decorations covered the humble abode. All the work of Willis, a young girl, now legally a woman. Willis would truly never be a woman, according to her mother. You have the mind of a child, and you always will. It can't be helped. It was the way God made you. Willis crept down the hall, hoping not to wake her mother. Mother, unfortunately, was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with her boyfriend. Toby wore a camo jacket, watching Willis walk across the kitchen. Mother looked like she was struggling to stay awake, cigarette in hand, threatening to fall into her coffee cup. One time Mother had fallen asleep with her cigarette in hand, dropped it into her hair. It had begun to smolder and had smelled. Luckily Toby had been there, not yet high, and dumped his spit bottle onto her hair, laughing. "There she is!" exclaimed Toby, leaning forward, smiling. Mother jumped in her seat, startled by the sudden noise. Willis giggled, holding her hands over her mouth. Toby laughed with Willis' smile growing larger, staring. "About time you woke up," said Mother, looking from Toby to her daughter. Toby, who stared at Willis like a man would a woman. "Go put on a bra, baby," demanded Mother. "Then we can get these presents opened." Willis clapped, bounced, grabbed a chocolate chip cookie from the counter, darting to her room. Usually she would have argued with her mother, complaining about being constricted, that the straps cut into her chest and back. Today was Christmas, and Santa had come. As she dressed herself, she could hear Mother and Toby arguing. "What's going on with you and Willis, Toby? You want her, and Willis wants you?" she screamed. Willis didn't understand what was going on, but all she wanted was her presents from Santa. Later that night, after Toby and Mother had disappeared into Mother's bedroom so she could give Toby his Christmas present, Willis sat in the front of the Christmas tree, surrounded by her meager gifts, kicking her legs, playing. Music was lightly playing Christmas jingles from the radio. On the television, the news was on. The reporters talked about the coming New Year. A small boxed electrical heater whirred as a strong wind rocked the trailer's thin walls. The lights flickered, and Willis sat up, groaning. The lights flickered like a dance club scene from a movie. She then started laughing, dancing her dolls. The radio played static momentarily. The jingles continued loudly, louder than before. The front door flew open. Willis looked toward it to see a purple mist. She watched it float across the room, mouth opened wide. It stopped at the kitchen counter, where it twirled about in the air. Willis shook her head, placing her hands to her temples. "No, you're a liar. I don't like you," she said sternly, head still in her hands. The mist twirled faster, sending mail flying across the room. "Where are the children? I like the children. I want to play with them," she said, pleading. Willis began to weep. The mist calmed and took the form of an old man, just momentarily motioning for Willis to come over. His face was kind. Willis dried her eyes, stood dropping her toys. When she approached, the figure pointed down at something on the counter. As his pointer finger touched the counter, the old man became mist, disappearing. When Willis approached the counter where the spirit was just seconds before, she found a letter with snowflake stickers stuck to the front.